Hello, everybody. Today, I want to talk about moral and this idea, not in the usual way in which I talk about it, like in the negative aspect, but actually in the positive, in the good aspect. And actually, I want to start by first asking this question, like, where does moral come from, right? Moral, we have to understand, or I understand it as this little voice inside your head, like the little angel and the little devil. It's like the little angel, that voice of reason, that consciousness. And I'm going to actually elaborate a little bit more on what consciousness actually means, which is referent to like the intellect, to like intelligence. But okay, I made a video a while back talking about how moral is actually manifested with the other, right? Like when you have another person that you affect besides yourself, besides your needs, you affect another person's needs, another person's wants, you trespass another person's limits. That's when you kind of, that's where uh, moral is born, right? That's where you say, okay, this is bad, this is good, right? That's where you question yourself, that's where you reflect. Now, I've been reading Eric Erickson's biography, and more specifically, his 8 steps in personal development or personal growth in humans. And it's very interesting because there's this part, I think it's around step 2, step 3, where you face off initiative versus guilt. And this is actually, initiative is obviously your autonomy, right? Your willingness to do things. And that is obviously impulsed by your instincts, by your needs, by your desires, by your wants. But um, you're facing off against guilt, right? And guilt is something that you experience when other people tell you, no, that's wrong, don't do that. And who are the first people that do this? Well, your mom, your dad, right? Your teachers, the adults in your life, right? And let's remember, this is when you're a kid, right? So there's this whole theory, there's this whole debate actually about whether things in life are innate, right? Whether they're predisposed genetically or whether nurture or our environment creates them. And I've always been in favor of the environment, right? Like, for example, how do we acquire language, right? Language acquisition is because we already have a chip installed of us inside of us, and we just like copy whatever language we're born into. But it's thanks to the chip that we're able to pick up language. Other theorists will say no, it's thanks to the culture in which you're in that you're able to learn the language, right? Now, I'm not going to get into the debate, but if we're talking about moral, I would say maybe you could have a chip inside of you, like a moral chip. Let's think of a person that's born in the wild, right? Like a child, a baby. From when they're a baby, they're born in the wild, and they don't have any of these social conditioning, right? But even then, they're among social individuals, right? If they're by themselves, I would probably say they wouldn't have a moral bone. But in this case, you're born into a society, you're born with a mother and a father, right? A lot of people say, well, the spiritual inclinations in our lives are actually in it, right? Like they're inside of us. We're predisposed genetically to believe in gods. And I'm like, no, I think those are more like social constructs. Moral is also a social construct. Like when no one's watching you and you steal something, but you still feel guilty, they say, oh, that's natural. And I say, no, that's because your parents have been telling you don't do bad stuff. Your teachers, the adults in your life, right? Maybe even your peers, maybe even people younger than you. So it's like, no, you're conditioned, and that little voice in your head are all of those people, right? So first of all, where does consciousness or moral consciousness come from? It comes from your mom, from your parents, from your dad, from people saying don't do that. And if they give you the reasons why, that's where you start to develop intelligence and consciousness. Now, it's very interesting that they mention moral as consciousness, right? Like, well, I'm mentioning it as that, but consciousness is being aware of what you're doing, right? Being aware that what you're doing could be trespassing other people's limitations, right? Second, there are people that are born or raised in very bad or immoral environments, right? Basically with no consciousness. And this is tied into honor, right? So we can say there is no honor among thieves, for example. So people that just do bad things, maybe they don't think about it. They just do things by, instinct. And yeah, so these are people that are born in immoral context. Third of all, there are people that are born on the other extreme of things, right? So I'm going from one extreme to the other. In the other extreme, you have people, excuse me, that are born in excess of consciousness, of moral, of duty. Now, I've been watching Game of Thrones lately, and Ned Stark is an example of this type of person, right? Where like you will basically sacrifice your own life, right? Or potentially put yourself in harm's way. So you're impractical because you have so much honor, because you have so much moral virtue, moral righteousness, so much consciousness, right? You're so good, right? You're so virtuous, which I think both extremes are bad, right? Now, fourth, there are cynical people that know about good, right? Maybe they had a mother and a father that told them, don't do that, that's bad, respect other people's property, etc. But they know that that's not enough. So they take on a practical approach, right? Like in Game of Thrones, there's this character, Bronn, and he seems like he knows about being good, right? But he's also cynical, right? He's sarcastic. He's kind of a bad guy, but he's not really bad, like he has those two how can I say, those two energies in him, right? And in Game of Thrones you see all types of characters, like good, really bad, and in between, kind of like Bronn. Um, so yeah, he's more practical. Now, this is the fight between the logical and the emotional, right? Um, Fifth, there are people that use moral righteousness or moral virtue to their advantage. I would say like white collar crime, CEOs that embezzle money, insider trading, even politicians, right? Which they are in position of power, but it's harder for them to get caught doing bad things because the information or the knowledge that they have is so exclusive, right? So they get away with a lot of stuff, right? And I think also that's also bad, right? And six, there are other type of people which are honest, moral people that are in position of power, and despite being in a position of power and being able to take advantage of people with information and everything, they still do good. And I think that's the highest moral standard and virtue which we can strive to reach as human beings. Like actually being able to steal millions, right? Being able to steal whatever without anybody seeing you, without basically, like, you could get away with it. You're not going to get caught red-handed, and still not doing it, still being honest, right? Maybe because of your mother's voice, because of your parents' voice, because of your consciousness, right? I think that is kind of you know honorable. And then we have, of course, the fight between justice and compassion. Like, do you show compassion when you're trying to reach justice? And I think yes, in the balance of justice, you do have to consider the logical, the cold, the calculated, right? Like the facts, what really happened. But then you also, I think you need to give opportunity to people. You need to be tolerant to a certain extent, right? When it's the fight between the mind and the heart, I used to lean more towards the mind, right? Like be rational, be logical, be cold. But now I kind of lean a little bit more to the heart, and I say you do have to take emotions into consideration, right? Because what if you were in that place? You would want to be taken into consideration too, right? Um, so let me know what you think. Do you think that's a good step process towards righteousness? I think I'm watching the series John Adams, and they paint the founding fathers as these type of people with like power, or even presidents with power, but they will still do good, right? And despite the fact that they can abuse their power and their authority, they don't, and they still opt to do good, right? To be morally righteous and virtuous. All right. So let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. All right. Peace.